Me and my old Beethoven 7th Symphony, conducted by Herbert von Karajan. So I'm back in this monk's cell of mine with all mod cons, which isn't mine. It's only temporary accommodation, so we'll see, as the grown-ups say, but it's been a very good place to me for over 9 months now. Only meant to be 2. The most 56 nights, days, whatever. My little visits by my spiders and my moths and things. Got my little garden, etc. Furnished now. Well, I've always thought of the portrait head of a young woman by Vermeer was very beautiful, so I've kept that in my spirit. And now this actual real person, purportedly from Russia, Sasha Alexandra Nezhnaya, has appeared on the scene with beautiful letters, quite frankly, albeit it now turns out that it's a scam, and a con. She's still a very beautiful young woman, and if all that had been said in the letters were true, then to have a lifelong partner and someone of 28, for heaven's sake, I'm 63, would have been marvellous. So I shall put it down to experience. It's reawakened in me this longing. I am alone in this world. Unlike St. Francis, he had all his fellow monks, Christians, about him. And most gloriously, he had Claire as well. I'm alone. I suppose that's God saying, be strong. You can stand on your own 2 feet without any other worldly human support. And I can. So I do. Blasted psyche boys want to get their claws into me. Well, to that. Just because I don't fit into their pattern. I mean, I've done it all before. I do have strong feelings, and I know that I can terrify people, I suppose, verbally, purely. I'd never become physically violent to anyone. But people aren't capable of dealing with someone who can be so explosive. But only when my toes have been trodden on. I don't just a priori turn up and explode. I mean, that would just be nonsense. Having lived here for the best part of 8 months, there was nonsense going on around me with drugs and some young girl fixating on me and throwing rocks at the door in the end. I had to call the police on Sunday evening just a fortnight ago. Awful. They've carted her off in the end. I'm back in situ. I could have potentially been in psyche now, under a section. They had the full panel, a senior consultant psychiatrist from Holland, a registrar psychiatrist from Sri Lanka, and a Welsh social worker, and that's what it takes. If 3 of them could have signed me off for further psychiatric assessment. Instead, they gave me back to the police, who then dropped me back here, home. But I had another letter from them that there's some follow-up, and I just completely rejected. Yes, I struggle with life. I do find it extraordinarily painful, actually. I'm a very sensitive little old fellow, quite frankly. But I'm also tough, resilient. So, puff to them. I've got a bit of paper now, sort of, to prove I'm not a nutter. Brilliant. Ha! Begone to them. As to Sasha, well, live and learn, I suppose. It certainly has reawakened in me this longing. I don't want to spend the rest of my life alone. I'm always alone. I meet people all the time. I'm out and about. So I'm not a hermit. In Manus Tuus Domine, God has given me, I suppose, 3 principal women in my life. Sally, when I was in my early 20s, wonderful Sally. We lived together and so on for 5-6 years. She would have married me, and I didn't feel that was right. Actually, there was Zoe as well. I was engaged to. And then my former wife, again, I'm sure that was meant to be. I mean, it's just absolutely clear. Our son, Robert Francis, came along so clearly, easily, straightforwardly. And then her background and my background and the broken marriage, the suicide of my son. And then there was Stéphane in Paris, again, I suppose helped me along the way. I got pretty smitten by her. And now nothing really. Well, there we are. Right, I think that's enough for the moment. I'm seeing the housing people today. This has always only been a temporary situation, so to get myself on the council accepting a duty to house me, St Albans Council, well, I haven't got any better offers, quite frankly. And with money in the bank, once I'm settled somewhere, then it's my place. As long as I pay the rent or whatever, free to come and go as I please, not restrained by, and I can't start knocking walls down, but I dare say they might take a dim view of that, the council, but it's different. It's you have a full rental agreement, and I don't know. I mean, just like renting in the private sector, there'll be rules and regulations regarding wherever you are. So we shall see, as the grown-ups say. 10:30 this morning. It's Thursday, the 23rd of July 2020, on the slippery slope back down to midwinter. this coronavirus is going to have a massive influence on all the world now into the indefinite future. Howsoever these things happen, but I went off to King's Lynn over the weekend. My father's family came from. And there was just an old book there, which I picked up about Joan of Arc. But those times, there was the huge pandemic then, the Black Death, I think it was called in the end, sort of 1345, I think. And then the Peasants' Revolt, so almost 40 years later, because of what went on. There was the 100 Years' War going on, and then, of course, Joan of Arc. So that's what the book is, that period in history. So it took very nearly 40 years, and the economic difficulties that ensued from that pandemic and the way it changed society from people being sort of serfs and tied to their feudal landlord, albeit there'd been Magna Carta in 1215 and were meant to be free men and women and so on. But so I can sense this coronavirus now is just having a massive effect upon the whole world, and just the way, as it were, normal life continues. It is not. Coming through St Pancras International railway station on my way back, it was midday-ish, I think. So normally that concourse would be heaving with people, and it was just handfuls. There's traffic on the roads, but again, that's much diminished, and I'm sure many businesses on the high street will just fail. The whole workplace thing, offices travelling into town. I've just checked the figures again. The UK has one of the worst deaths per million of all countries in the whole world, if not possibly even the worst deaths per million. Ho, ho, ho. 600 and something. The overall world figure is 80 deaths per million. And the likes of India and so on, it's still way down. China, just down in the tens, I think even under 10 deaths per million. So I don't know what that says. Basically, I think the UK made a fundamental cock-up. They let 18 plus million people in February, March, from Europe, from Italy, the hotspot, skiers and the like. If they'd locked down a week earlier, I'd heard, instead of, what's the figure now? 32,000 deaths. It would have been just 8, a quarter. I heard one expert saying that. Just a week earlier, if they'd locked down just 1 week earlier. Well, for heaven's sake. Old Boris, Mr. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, was fiddling while Rome burned, quite frankly. Right, so life goes on. We're granted another day of life. On the personal front, yes, it would be wonderful. But I've always felt it's up to God. Specifically because of Sally, my former wife, and Stefan. Those 3 women who've had a massive influence. And Zoe, actually. Her father was black, and my mother, of course, being Scottish, South African, black and white don't mix, so that was a pretty rocky spell between Mother and I, but we made up later. She was a wonderful mother, my mother. I really could not have wished for a better, both mother and father, so stepfather. My own father died before I was born, and then my mother remarried, so there was no divorce in our family. And now here I am at 63, all these years later, 30 years since I met my former wife, and my life is still on its head. But God has given me this absolutely rock-solid Christian faith. I have no doubt. I know that my Redeemer liveth. Christ within me now, here and now today. And then, because it's real for me, I can share it. I can let this light of Christ shine in the dark world in which we live. And it's a beautiful, all-conquering light. Amen.